The storm hit the city faster than anyone expected. By evening, the sky had turned almost black, and the wind pushed against buildings like it wanted to tear them apart. Ethan Walker sat alone in his small Seattle apartment, trying to ignore the loud thunder that made the lights flicker every few minutes. He wrapped a blanket around himself and pretended he wasn't counting each time the power dipped. He didn't like storms, but he also didn't think anything unusual would happen tonight. He was wrong. A sudden knock at the door made him jump. It wasn't a gentle tap, it was urgent, sharp, and completely out of place in a night where no one should have been outside. Ethan stood up fast, his heart beating harder than the rain on his windows. He walked to the door and opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor asking for help, but it wasn't a neighbor. It was Julia Hayes, his boss. For a second, Ethan just stared. Julia never looked anything less than perfect at work. There, she always wore calm confidence like a shield. But tonight she stood soaked, her coat dripping water onto the hallway floor, strands of wet hair stuck to her face. Her voice trembled when she spoke his name. She looked nothing like the woman who led meetings with steady control. Ethan. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said, catching her breath. "My building lost power. Everything shut down. My car wouldn't start, and the streets flooded too fast. Your apartment, it was the closest place I could reach." He didn't hesitate. "Come inside," he said and stepped back so she could enter. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she should be there. Ethan closed the door behind her, shutting out the rain but not the tension that suddenly filled the room. The storm outside crashed again, shaking the windows. Julia brushed her hair back, trying to catch her breath and steady herself. He grabbed a towel and handed it to her. "Here. You're freezing." "Thank you," she whispered, pressing the towel against her face, her hands shaking lightly. She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't someone who pretended to be fragile. But tonight she looked tired, overwhelmed, and almost relieved to be somewhere safe. Ethan tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice how different she looked outside the walls of their office. Without her work expression, without her professional tone, she almost looked younger. Softer. Human in a way he had never seen before. She took a deep breath. "I hope this isn't too strange. I didn't want to bother anyone." "You're not bothering me," Ethan said quickly. "I'm glad you made it here instead of being stuck outside." She nodded, but her eyes showed a mix of embarrassment and exhaustion. The storm cracked again, and the apartment lights flickered weakly. Ethan walked to the heater and turned it up a little more. "You can sit," he said, pointing at the couch. Julia thanked him and sat, pulling her cold hands close to the heater's warm air. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the heavy rain pounding against the building, like the night was refusing to calm down. Ethan went to make tea, partly to help her warm up and partly to steady himself. This situation was unexpected, unusual, and strangely emotional. He had worked with her for almost 2 years. She was the kind of boss who always seemed in control. Seeing her like this made something inside him shift. When he gave her the mug, she wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "I really appreciate this," she said softly. "Tonight turned into something I didn't expect." He sat across from her. The dim light from the lamp reflected on her face, showing that she was still shaken, but slowly relaxing now that she was safe indoors. "I didn't expect any of this either," he admitted. They shared a small, tired smile. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was the smile two people give when the world outside feels too loud and they suddenly find each other in the quiet. The storm roared once more, but new one. This wasn't just a storm anymore. This was the start of something. Neither of them moved toward the door. The night had created a situation neither of them planned, yet neither of them wanted to undo. Ethan didn't know where this night would lead, only he didn't have a name for yet. The storm showed no sign of stopping, and the apartment grew warmer with the small heater and the tea Ethan had made. Julia still sat on the couch, wrapped in a towel, staring into the flickering candlelight. She looked small in the big couch, almost like a person trying to hide from the world. Ethan felt an unexpected pull in his chest, a mix of worry and something he had never admitted before. He wanted to make her feel safe, wanted to take care of her, but he wasn't sure how. He had never seen her like this, away from the office, away from the sharp edge of her authority. I never realized how loud storms could get in a city, Julia said softly, trying to break the silence. Her voice was calmer now, but still had a faint tremble. It feels different when you're not alone. Ethan nodded. It's easier to handle with someone else. She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. There was a softness there he had never seen at work, a vulnerability that made her feel more human, more relatable. He moved closer, just enough to reach for the blanket draped over the armchair, and draped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist, only nodded in thanks. That simple gesture, shared in the quiet apartment, made both of them aware of the closeness that had developed so suddenly. I didn't expect to find anyone here, Julia admitted, sipping her tea. You always seem so calm, Ethan. At the office, you handle everything without panicking. I envy that sometimes. He smiled, leaning back slightly, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm not as calm as you think. I just keep it to myself. For the first time, she looked at him without the layers of professionalism she wore at work. It was almost shocking how different she seemed. Her hands were no longer tense, her shoulders weren't stiff. She wasn't the boss demanding results or giving instructions. She was simply Julia, a person who had faced too much stress alone and now allowed herself a brief moment of rest. They sat quietly for a while, the storm outside pounding against the windows like it wanted to enter. Ethan glanced at her and noticed she was watching him too, silently. It wasn't a romantic look yet, but it was more intimate than anything they had ever shared at the office. Something was building, subtle and unspoken, a connection formed in a night that neither had planned for. I feel exposed, Julia said finally. Not like this, but like. I can let someone in, even for a little while. You know what I mean? Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I think I do. And it's okay to let someone see that side of you. The honesty in her voice made the apartment feel warmer than the heater could. He realized that this night was changing the way he saw her, not just as a boss or a professional, but as a person who deserved care, understanding, and attention. She had spent so much time keeping up appearances, hiding behind work, but now, here, she was real. The storm's rhythm slowed slightly, but the tension in the room was different. It was not fear or urgency anymore, it was a quiet, shared understanding. They talked in short bursts, sharing stories they hadn't told anyone else. Julia admitted how hard it was to maintain her image, to appear unshakable, and Ethan told her about the small fears he kept to himself, the moments when he felt he might not be enough. You make it sound easier than it is, she said quietly, her hand brushing the edge of the blanket as if seeking comfort. I don't think anyone at work really sees me like this. You're not at work, Ethan said softly. And tonight, no one else matters. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something like relief in her eyes. The wall between boss and employee had started to crumble, leaving two people in a quiet space that felt safe. Neither said it aloud, but the unspoken thought was there. This night was changing how they would see each other from now on. Hours passed, and the storm began to fade, though the sky remained dark. They stayed on the couch, closer now, speaking in whispers. Each word, each glance, carried a weight that neither of them had expected. It was a night of connection, of understanding, of letting go of the barriers that work, life, and pride had built. Ethan realized that the moment wouldn't last forever. The morning would come, and with it, responsibilities, rules, and the office hierarchy. But for now, in the warmth of the small apartment, in the glow of candlelight and the soft sound of the rain, they were just two humans finding comfort in each other's presence. It wasn't love yet. It wasn't a confession. It was the first step toward something deeper, a gentle shift that neither of them could ignore. The storm had brought them together, and now, in its calm aftermath, a quiet bond was forming, a bond that promised the night was only the beginning. The storm had grown heavier again, and the apartment was dim except for the soft glow of candles Ethan had lit. The heater hummed quietly, but it couldn't chase away the chill completely. Julia wrapped herself in a blanket he had given her, and Ethan noticed how her shoulders slowly relaxed. She was no longer the sharp, controlled boss he knew at work. Tonight, she seemed human, fragile, and real, and the sight stirred something unexpected in him. "I don't like asking for help," Julia admitted softly, staring into her tea. "I always feel like I have to handle everything on my own." "You're allowed to ask for help," Ethan said without thinking. His voice was calm, but he felt his heartbeat quicken. "You don't always have to carry the weight alone." She looked at him, and for the first time, there was no professional mask. Only a woman who had been under pressure for too long, finally letting someone in. Her eyes softened, and she gave a small, tired smile. "I suppose that's why I came here. You make it feel easier." Ethan felt his throat tighten slightly. He had never heard her speak like this, never heard her admit she needed comfort, even for a moment. He moved closer, not to invade her space but to be near her, offering silent support. Julia didn't move away. Instead, she leaned back, letting the blanket cover her more fully, and the two of them sat together in the quiet apartment. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside, there was a strange calm between them. They talked quietly, softly, sharing small details about their lives that never came up at the office. Julia told him about nights she stayed late, pretending she didn't feel lonely. Ethan shared how he sometimes felt invisible despite his efforts at work. Each word built a bridge between them, erasing the distance the office had always imposed. At one point, Julia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ethan, can I ask something? Something unusual?" "Of course," he replied, leaning in slightly. She hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "Don't call me your boss tonight." He blinked, taken aback. "What should I call you then?" "Just Julia," she said, almost shyly. "Someone who doesn't have to have it all together. Someone just here." Her words hung in the air, soft but full of meaning. Ethan realized that she wasn't asking him to do something forbidden or inappropriate. She was asking to be seen without the weight of her title, without the boundaries of the office. For the first time, she wanted to exist simply as a person, not as a leader, not as a manager. He nodded, feeling a warmth spread in his chest. "Julia, I can do that." The way she looked at him now was different, gentle, open, vulnerable. It wasn't romantic yet, but it carried a quiet electricity, a sense that the rules between them had shifted, even if just a little. Ethan felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. This wasn't about crossing lines, it was about connection, trust, and honesty. The storm outside seemed to mirror the shift inside the apartment. The wind still howled, the rain pounded, but inside, there was a bubble of safety and warmth. They talked more, sharing small confessions and personal thoughts. Julia admitted she often felt pressured to appear perfect at work, while Ethan shared his insecurities about always measuring up. Each confession made the space between them feel smaller, more intimate. At one point, Julia's hand brushed the edge of the blanket again, almost unconsciously, and Ethan noticed how naturally she leaned slightly closer. Neither of them spoke of it, but the quiet gestures said more than words could. They were connecting, not through romance or attraction yet, but through mutual understanding and empathy. "I feel lighter," Julia whispered after a while. "Like I don't have to pretend for a moment." "That's good," Ethan said, smiling softly. "You deserve that." The storm continued, but it no longer seemed threatening. Instead, it was a soundtrack to a night of honesty, care, and shared human vulnerability. They sat together, talking and listening, each aware of the other's presence, each feeling something new forming between them. It was not a declaration of love. It was not even a first kiss. But it was a beginning. A step toward trust, connection, and something deeper than friendship or office hierarchy. Ethan realized that Julia had opened a door that no one at work had ever entered, and he felt honored to be the one standing there with her. It was not a declaration of love. It was not even a first kiss. But it was a beginning. A step toward trust, connection, and something deeper than friendship or office hierarchy. Ethan realized that Julia had opened a door that no one at work had ever entered, and he felt honored to be the one standing there with her, and as the storm raged outside, Ethan knew that something in their relationship had changed forever. A simple request, "Don't call me your boss tonight," had created space for connection, trust, and the soft spark of something more. It was a night neither of them would forget.
The storm had finally faded, leaving the city quiet and the sky dark with early morning light. Inside Ethan's apartment, the candles flickered low and the heater hummed softly. Julia and Ethan still sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, neither wanting to move. The night had stretched long, filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and confessions. And both of them felt a shift in the air. Something had changed between the man, understanding, a connection, a trust that wasn't there before. Julia leaned back against the couch, exhaling deeply, her shoulders finally relaxing. She looked at Ethan, her eyes soft but serious, as if she wanted to say something important but wasn't sure how. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I've spent so much time alone, always pretending I'm strong. I never realized how heavy that could feel until tonight." Ethan watched her carefully. He had never seen this side of her, the part of Julia that wasn't perfect, polished, or in control. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," he said gently. "Not here. Not with me." She smiled faintly, a little sad but also grateful. "You're easy to talk to. I don't know why, but it feels natural, safe." "I'm glad," Ethan replied. "I like that you feel safe. That's all I want." The night had stripped away all pretense, all titles, all barriers. Julia wasn't the boss. He wasn't the employee. They were just two people sharing a quiet, honest space. And for the first time, it felt like the world outside didn't matter. They had talked for hours, but it didn't feel like enough. Each word, each glance, each small gesture built a bridge between them. Julia's voice softened again. "I've always admired you, Ethan. Your patience, your calm, even when I've been difficult at work. Tonight, I can see why I trust you." He felt a warmth spread in his chest, the kind that didn't come from the heater. "I trust you too, Julia, more than you know. And I'm glad we're here, like this, just..." Here they sat in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. There was no rush, no awkward tension, only the quiet acknowledgement of something forming between them. The night had opened doors neither expected. And now the morning light was creeping through the blinds, marking a new beginning. "I feel different," Julia whispered, almost to herself. "Like I can finally breathe without pretending everything is perfect." Ethan nodded. "That's how it should feel. You deserve it." She glanced at him, her eyes lingering on his face. There was gratitude there, yes, but also a spark, something gentle, cautious, yet unmistakable. It wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't a declaration. It was the start of something deeper, something neither of them had to define yet. The storm outside had brought them together, but the quiet aftermath had allowed them to connect in ways neither expected. Ethan realized that Julia's presence in his apartment in this calm space had changed how he saw her entirely. She was no longer just his boss. She was someone real, vulnerable, and surprisingly tender. Someone he wanted to protect, to understand, and perhaps, in time, to care for in ways he hadn't admitted even to himself. Julia finally spoke again, her voice steady but soft. "Thank you, Ethan, for seeing me. Not the boss, not the manager. Just me." He smiled, a small, honest smile that carried everything he felt. "I see you, Julia, and I'm glad I do." The room was quiet now, the storm fully gone. Outside, the first birds were beginning to stir, and the city slowly awakened to a new day. Inside, however, time felt suspended. They didn't need to talk anymore. They didn't need to move or act. Just sitting there, together, sharing the silence, felt enough. Ethan realized that last night had been more than sheltering someone during a storm. It had been about understanding, trust, and opening hearts. Julia had let him in, and he had done the same. And now their connection felt solid yet fragile, like something precious waiting to grow. They didn't need to name it. They didn't need to rush. The spark was there, small, quiet, but unmistakable. It was the kind of spark that could turn into something meaningful over time, the kind that made ordinary moments extraordinary. Finally, Julia shifted slightly, giving a small, genuine smile. "I should probably get ready," she said softly, though she didn't move immediately. "I'll walk you to the door," Ethan offered, standing. But they stayed close, lingering in that calm, tender space for just a few more seconds, savoring the quiet connection they had built. As Julia left, Ethan felt a strange mix of emptiness and hope. The night had ended, but it had left something behind, a bond that promised more. It was the beginning of understanding, trust, and maybe, in time, something deeper than either of them had dared imagine. The storm had passed, but the night would stay with them forever. The spark had been lit,